Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take a stack of information, sift through it, and pull out those fascinating nuggets of knowledge you didn't even know you were missing. Today, we're plunging into something we all interact with every single waking moment, something incredibly powerful, yet often surprisingly misunderstood: language. Have you ever paused to truly consider the weight, the precise nuance of the words you toss around so casually? I know I have. My own aha moment with this topic came when I realized how often I'd use words that felt right, but maybe weren't the most, well, accurate. Our vocabulary is this vast, sprawling landscape of terms, and it's so easy to fall into the trap of thinking that synonyms, those words that appear to mean the same thing, are perfectly interchangeable. But as you'll discover today, that's rarely, if ever, the case. We've been poring over some really insightful excerpts from Webster's Dictionary of Synonyms and Antonyms, created in cooperation with the editors of Merriam-Webster. And let me tell you, it's a treasure trove of linguistic distinctions. Our mission in this deep dive is to go far beyond just simple definitions. We're here to unearth the precise implications, the surprising context, and the subtle emotional weight that makes each word unique, helping you become truly well-informed in your linguistic choices. Okay, let's unpack this.
And that's exactly the heart of it. This isn't just a dry lesson in vocabulary. This deep dive is about understanding the very fabric of thought, the true intent behind our words, and the profound impact those choices can have. When you start to differentiate between terms you once thought were identical, it's like suddenly gaining X-ray vision for communication. You'll begin to experience those moments where you realize how a seemingly small shift in wording can completely alter the message, the feeling, or even the perception of reality itself. It's about empowering you to choose your words with surgical precision, whether you're writing an email, giving a presentation, or just having a conversation with a friend.
Absolutely, it's about getting that clarity. So let's kick things off with something super relatable. Think about that common, often frustrating experience of not having something you need. Maybe it's a tool, a skill, or even a feeling like peace and quiet. We often instinctively reach for words like lack or want, but I've learned that the dictionary really lays out a whole spectrum of absence and desire here. It's not quite so simple. So if I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, oh, I don't have enough coffee, I could say I lack it, I want it, I need it, or maybe even it's required for me to function. But I know those can't possibly all mean the same thing, right? What's the fundamental difference between lack, want, need, and require when we're describing absence or desire? Is there one I should, never use if I mean another?
That's a great starting point because while they all share a core of being without, their distinctions lie in the specific nature of that absence or the urgency of the desire. And yes, there are definitely times when using one instead of another would completely misrepresent your meaning. Let's start with lack. The dictionary tells us lack can imply a simple absence, a neutral observation that something just isn't there. For instance, the source gives the example, a club that lacked a room to meet in.
Okay.
It's a straightforward statement of fact. There's nothing inherently negative or urgent implied, just a void. It's almost a dispassionate observation. Or it can refer to a shortage in supply, meaning maybe it's present but just not enough to meet demands. It's quite objective, really.
Right, just stating the facts, no emotion attached necessarily.
Exactly. Now, want adds a significant layer. It takes that idea of being without and layers on an implication of urgent needing or desiring. When you say, as the source does, you may have whatever you want, it introduces a stronger emotional or volitional element. There's an active pursuit implied, the drive to acquire.
Ah, okay. So it's not just missing. It's missed and actively sought.
Precisely. This is about craving or an unsatisfied appetite with a strong personal dimension.
And what about need? How does that step things up?
Well, need elevates this further. It stresses urgent necessity more than mere absence or shortage. This is often about fundamental, indispensable requirements. The example, everyone needs a friend, perfectly illustrates this. It's not just a desire. It's portrayed as a vital, often non-negotiable requirement for well-being or function.
So it implies something truly essential for survival, maybe, or success.
Or proper functioning. It's a very strong imperative.
Okay, so lack is neutral, want is desire, need is necessity. Where does require fit in? Is it just a formal version of need?
It's often interchangeable with need, yes, but it heightens the implication of urgent necessity, often in a more formal or demanding context. Think of the source's example, a situation that required drastic measures. It connects to formal demands, inherent conditions, or even rules and regulations.
I see.
It's less about a personal craving and more about an imperative imposed by circumstances or a system or even a logical consequence. It signifies that something is absolutely necessary as a condition.
Wow. Oh, okay, that really clears it up. So, thinking about my earlier example, I could say I lack the discipline to wake up early. That's just an observation of my character flaw, maybe. I want to wake up early. That's a strong desire I have.
Right.
But I need to wake up early for this big meeting tomorrow that feels vital for my job.
Yes, an urgent necessity.
And if my job description explicitly states I must be available from 8 a.m., then the job requires me to wake up early.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
You've nailed the distinctions.
Yeah.
It's wild how much specific intent you're communicating just by choosing that one word.
It really is. Okay, let's switch gears a bit and talk about size. I'm definitely guilty of this all the time, using large, big, and great, almost as if they were, totally interchangeable, like in a kid's storybook. A big house, a large meal, a great idea. It all just means, well, big. But I'm starting to suspect there are specific powers to each that I'm missing out on. How do we truly paint a picture of scale or importance or even awe with these three?
You're absolutely right to suspect that. While they all denote something above average in magnitude, their applications diverge quite precisely. And choosing the right one can completely change the image or the feeling you convey. So let's start with large. The dictionary says it's typically preferred when you're talking about dimensions, extent, capacity, quantity, or amount. So when you say a large meal, like in the source example, you're quantifying it. You're describing its volume or quantity.
Okay, measurable things.
Exactly. It can also stress breadth, comprehensiveness, or generosity, like when discussing large issues that are comprehensive, or a large heart that is generous. Its antonym is given as small. So large fundamentally quantifies, giving you a very measurable sense of scale.
Right. And big, how is that different? It feels more common.
It is common. And big, on the other hand, often emphasizes bulk, mass, weight, or volume. So a big book focuses on its physical heft and perhaps its imposing presence. But big also has a strong connotation of impressiveness or importance, especially socially or emotionally.
Ah, like a big deal.
Exactly. Or the dictionary example, a big man on campus. It's about
Yeah.
social heft and influence, not just physical size. Or a big decision, which carries significant weight. Its antonym is little. So it contrasts with large by focusing more on physical presence or social and emotional significance.
Okay, large for quantity, big for heft or importance. That leaves great. That one feels grander somehow.
It often is. While it can imply physical magnitude, it's usually with connotations of wonder, surprise, or awe. The source uses the Great Canyon as an example. That evokes not just its physical size, but its immense awe-inspiring scale and natural magnificence.
Mm-hmm. Sense of wonder.
Right. More often, however, great implies eminence, distinction, or supremacy, like possessing a very great talent. It speaks to outstanding quality or importance. Its antonym is also little. So, great really highlights the qualitative, often awe-inspiring or distinguished aspect of something.
So this is genuinely eye-opening. A large house tells me about its square footage, its capacity. Simple facts.
Correct.
A big house suggests it's imposing, maybe physically dominant on the street. It has presence.
Yes, a sense of bulk or importance.
But a great house implies something more. Maybe its historical significance, its architectural beauty, its grandeur. It evokes a sense of reverence almost.
Precisely. You've captured the nuances perfectly. It's not just about size, is it? It's about choosing the adjective that perfectly matches the scale and the feeling you want to convey.
I feel like I'm unlocking secret levels of description here. This is fantastic. Okay, confession time. I think we've all been a little bit lazy at some point. I certainly have. Guilty as charged. But the dictionary also gives us indolent and slothful. Are these just, fancier, more academic ways of saying the same thing? Or do they actually describe distinct flavors of inaction? Because if I'm calling myself slothful instead of just lazy, I want to make sure I'm using the right kind of self-deprecation.
Oh, they definitely describe distinct flavors, and understanding these nuances can be incredibly insightful, both for self-reflection and for, describing others. It's not just about severity, but the nature of the disinclination to act. Lazy is the most common term, as you said, and it suggests a general disinclination to work or take trouble. It implies idleness or dawdling, even when work is present and necessary. The dictionary phrase, his habitually lazy son, paints a picture of someone actively avoiding effort, perhaps almost by choice.
Right, like they could work but choose not to.
Exactly. Its antonym is given as industrious. So, lazy often points to a conscious choice to avoid exertion.
Okay, so lazy is about avoidance. What about indolent? That sounds softer.
It often is. Indolent takes it a step further, suggesting a love of ease and a settled dislike of movement or activity. It often implies a passive acceptance of inactivity, a preference for comfort and ease, rather than an active avoidance of specific work. For example, the dictionary says, "The summer's heat made us all indolent." It's less about shirking duties and more about a comfortable surrender to inaction, a sort of languid disinclination.
Ah, like being happy to just chill out and do nothing.
Pretty much, its antonym is also industrious.
And slothful. That one sounds almost biblical, like one of the deadly sins.
It carries that weight, yes. Slothful implies a temperamental inability to act promptly or speedily, particularly when promptness or speed is actually required. This is often about an inherent natural slowness or sluggishness, almost like an ingrained characteristic that makes quick action difficult. The example, "the agency is usually slothful about fulfilling requests," suggests an ingrained lack of promptness or responsiveness, a kind of habitual tardiness or sluggishness.
So less about choice or comfort, more about inherent tempo.
That's a good way to put it. Again, its antonym is industrious. This points to a more inherent, almost unchangeable characteristic that hinders speedy action.
That's incredibly useful. If you're observing someone or even, let's say, managing a team, understanding these differences helps you identify the root cause of inaction,
Right.
which, as you said, is critical for addressing it effectively. Is it a choice to avoid work? Lazy? Is it a deeply ingrained preference for comfort and ease? Indolent?
Right.
Or is it an inherent, almost temperamental difficulty in responding quickly and with energy? Slothful.
Exactly.
Each requires a different approach, doesn't it? You wouldn't try to motivate a slothful person the same way you'd motivate someone who's just being lazy about a specific task.
Absolutely not. The intervention needs to match the diagnosis, so to speak.
Language isn't static, right? And neither are the states it describes. There are so many words that capture not just what is, but also what's shifting, what's hidden, or what's paused. It's like having a vocabulary for every stage of a transformation or a period of inactivity. Let's start with falling back. We hear these terms in different contexts, like a lapse in judgment, or a health relapse, or someone backsliding on their commitments. What's the precise nature of the fall being described by each of these? Are they interchangeable, or do they point to different kinds of failures?
They are definitely not interchangeable. Each implies a fall from a different kind of height, and the nature of the decline is distinct. Let's take lapse. This usually presupposes a high level of something, maybe morals, manners, habits, or even attention. And it implies an abrupt departure from that level. The dictionary notes it can reflect culpability, grave weakness, or even simple absent-mindedness. Suffer a momentary lapse of manners is a good example. A brief, sudden drop from a standard.
Okay, so a sudden, maybe temporary drop from a previously high standard.
Exactly. Now, relapse presupposes definite improvement or advance, for instance in health, or maybe reaching a higher state of behavior or condition. And it implies a severe, often dangerous reversal back to the previous worst state. The source mentions a young person relapsing into childishness after showing maturity. It suggests a significant setback after progress.
So relapse is about falling back after getting better, a reversal.
Yes, often a serious one.
And backslide, how does that compare? It sounds similar to relapse.
It is similar, but the dictionary points out it's restricted almost entirely to moral and religious lapses. It tends to suggest unfaithfulness to duty, allegiance, or principles that were once professed, like breaking a religious vow or abandoning a moral commitment. The example, "kept a constant vigil lest he backslide," really emphasizes that moral or spiritual context. It's about betraying previously held beliefs or commitments.
What's fascinating here is how these words track not just the fall itself, but the previous state, the standard you fell from, the improvement you reversed, and the specific nature of the decline, whether it's sudden, a serious reversal, or a moral failing.
Precisely. It adds layers of context to the simple idea of falling back.
Okay, moving on to things that aren't active right now. Words like latent, dormant, quiescent. They all suggest something is kind of quietly sitting there, not doing much. But what makes each one unique? Is a latent talent the same as a dormant volcano or a quiescent period in politics? Do they imply different futures or different reasons for their current inactivity?
No, they're quite distinct in their implications, both regarding future activity and the nature of their current inactivity. Each gives you a different lens through which to view something that's currently, well, inactive. Let's start with latent. This applies to a concealed power or quality that is not yet in sight or action, but may emerge and develop in the future. The source example, a latent sadism that emerged during the war, illustrates a hidden capability or tendency that lay unseen until conditions allowed or perhaps triggered its development.
So like a hidden potential waiting to be revealed and grow.
Exactly. Something beneath the surface that could come out later. Its antonym is given as patent.
Okay. What about dormant? That makes me think of sleep.
That's a perfect analogy.
All right.
Dormant suggests the inactivity of something, like a feeling or power, as though it were sleeping and capable of renewed activity. It often implies a natural, temporary pause. A dormant passion existed between them points to a feeling that is merely resting, not gone, and can be rekindled naturally when conditions are right.
So it's expected to wake up again.
Often, yes. Its antonyms are active and live. This implies a natural state of rest, with the capacity for natural reawakening.
And quiescent. How does that differ from dormant?
Quiescence suggests a usually temporary cessation of activity. It often implies a calm or quiet state before potential reemergence. A stillness, a period of quietude. Political tensions were quiescent for the moment, describes a temporary lull, a state of calm before a potential storm. It's about a pause in activity, often implying a calm or quiet period before things might pick up again.
So maybe less like sleep, more like holding your breath, a temporary stillness.
That's a good way to think about it. It emphasizes the temporary calm.
Okay, 3 down. What about potential? That seems more forward-looking.
It absolutely is. Potential applies to what does not yet have existence, nature, or effect, but has the capacity for having it, and is likely soon to do so. This points to a high probability of future realization, almost like a ticking clock. A toxic waste dump that is a potential disaster means it's not a disaster yet, but the conditions are ripe for it to become one, and it's highly probable.
So it's not just possible, it's likely.
Yes, the emphasis is on the inherent capability and the strong likelihood of future manifestation. Its antonyms are active and actual.
And the last one, abeyant. That's less common.
It is. Abeyant applies to what is, for the time being, held off or suppressed. It implies a state of suspension or temporary inaction due to external factors, rather than an inherent quality of the thing itself. An abeyant distrust of the neighbors suggests that the distrust is still there, but for some reason it's being kept in check or suspended, maybe by a truce or a deliberate decision to hold back.
So it's being actively held back, not just naturally sleeping or waiting.
Exactly. Its antonyms are active and operative.
I think this group of words is incredibly helpful for anyone trying to assess risks, identify opportunities, or even understand human psychology. Are we dealing with a hidden danger waiting to develop, latent, a sleeping giant that can awaken naturally, dormant, a temporary calm before the storm, quiescent, an impending certainty, potential, or something deliberately put on hold, abandoned?
Precisely. Each choice provides a crucial piece of information about why something isn't active and its likelihood of becoming so.
All right, let's flip the coin. Instead of things changing or stopping, let's talk about things that stick around. When we want something to endure, we have options like lasting, permanent, durable, stable. But is a lasting impression really the same thing as a permanent mark? Or a durable fabric the same as a stable government? What are the nuances here?
They all imply endurance, yes, but they highlight different reasons or aspects of that endurance. Lasting implies a capacity to continue indefinitely. It focuses on the duration of an effect or state, suggesting it won't fade quickly. The example, a book that left a lasting impression on me, emphasizes the enduring effect over time. Its antonym is fleeting.
So it's about time, how long it continues.
Primarily, yes. Now, permanent adds the implication of being designed or planned or expected to stand or continue indefinitely. It suggests intentionality or fixedness. A permanent living arrangement implies it's not meant to be temporary. It's set up for the long haul.
So lasting is about capacity. Permanent is about intention or design.
That's a great way to put it. Its antonyms are temporary or ad interim when talking of people holding positions.
Okay, what about durable? That makes me think of things that can take a beating.
Exactly. Durable implies power of resistance to destructive agencies that exceeds others of the same kind. It focuses on resilience and robustness against wear and tear or stress. Durable fabrics is the classic example. They resist wearing out. It's about inherent toughness.
So it endures because it's tough.
Yeah. And finally, stable implies lastingness or durability because something is deep-rooted or balanced or established, and therefore resistant to being overturned or displaced. It suggests foundational strength, equilibrium. A stable government is one that isn't easily overthrown. It has strong foundations.
So it endures because it's well-grounded or balanced?
Precisely. Its antonyms are unstable or changeable.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, these words really highlight the different reasons something endures. Is it simply its inherent quality to last over time? Is it designed to be permanent? Is it tough and resistant? Durable? Or is it fundamentally sound and balanced? Stable.
Exactly. Choosing the right word tells you why it's sticking around, not just that it is.
Okay, back to inaction, but maybe a different kind. We've all had those days where we feel slow, sluggish, just incredibly drained. But when you delve into the dictionary, it turns out there are many ways to describe that feeling. Lethargy, languor, lassitude, stupor, torpor. Are these just fancy synonyms for tired, or do they each capture a unique shade of inertness, perhaps with a different cause or symptom?
Far from just tired. These words describe specific types and often causes of physical or mental inertness, each with distinct connotations. They paint very different pictures of sluggishness. Let's take lethargy. This implies a drowsiness or aversion to activity such as is induced by disease, injury, or drugs. The example, months of lethargy followed my skiing accident, suggests a medically or physically induced state of deep inactivity, a profound lack of energy directly linked to a physical cause.
Okay, so often a physical cause, like illness or injury.
Yes, its antonym is vigor.
What about languor? That sounds almost romantic. Or maybe just warm weather.
You can have that feel. Languor suggests inertia induced by an enervating climate or illness or soft living or love. This often has a softer, more relaxed, sometimes even pleasant connotation, a kind of weary ease. Languor induced by a tropical vacation evokes a leisurely, perhaps sensual form of inactivity.
Like a pleasant tiredness, maybe.
Could be. Its antonym is alacrity, meaning brisk and cheerful readiness. So languor is the opposite of that energetic state. It's a more passive, sometimes indulgent form of sluggishness.
Okay, then lassitude. Where does that fit?
Lassitude stresses listlessness or indifference resulting from fatigue or poor health. This word suggests a lack of energy and motivation, a weariness that affects both body and mind, often leading to apathy. A deepening depression marked by lassitude indicates a more profound, often distressing, lack of vitality and enthusiasm. It's a weariness of spirit as much as body.
So more about mental and emotional drain, perhaps.
Often, yes. Its antonym is also vigor.
And stupor, that sounds much more serious.
It is. Stupor implies a deadening of the mind and senses by, or as if by shock, narcotics or intoxicants. This is a more profound state of mental and physical incapacitation, often a complete unresponsiveness where one is barely conscious or aware. Lapsed into a stupor following a night of drinking paints a picture of a mind barely functioning.
Okay, definitely a severe state, like being stunned or drugged.
Yes, a significant impairment of consciousness.
Finally, torpor. That makes me think of hibernation.
Exactly. Torpor implies a state of suspended animation as of hibernating animals, but it may suggest merely extreme sluggishness. This is a general lack of responsiveness or vitality, a kind of dullness or numbness, often implying a slowed metabolic state, physically or mentally. A once alert mind, now in a state of torpor, describes a diminished capacity for activity or thought, a deep sluggishness.
So like being mentally or physically shut down, very unresponsive.
That's the idea. Its antonym is animation.
That's fascinating because understanding these distinctions can be incredibly valuable. Whether you're describing a character in a story, noting a subtle shift in their state, or even just trying to articulate your own state of being, you can move beyond just, I'm tired, to precisely convey the cause and nature of that inertness. Is it medically induced, climate-related, a mental drain, a shock-induced shutdown, or a deep hibernating sluggishness?
Absolutely. It gives you the tools for much more accurate description and diagnosis, metaphorically speaking.
Our language truly shines when it comes to describing people and their actions, doesn't it? It offers incredibly precise ways to categorize knowledge, define legal standing, and even, as we'll see, describe the various ways we might bend the truth. It's like having a bespoke suit for every scenario, from the courtroom to, well, a casual fib. Okay, let's talk about smart people, or at least people with a lot of knowledge. We might call someone learned, scholarly, or erudite. These all describe someone who knows a lot, right? But how would you say impress a university professor with your word choice? What are the subtle differences that signal different kinds of knowledge or intellectual pursuit?
That's a great question because they do signal different nuances about the nature and perhaps even the application of that knowledge. They aren't just synonyms for knowledgeable. Learned implies academic knowledge gained by long study and research. It's applicable to persons, but also associations or publications. The example, members of a learned society, emphasizes this acquired academic depth. It focuses on the accumulation of knowledge through diligent study.
So learned is about deep academic study.
Got it. Yes. Now, scholarly implies learning, but applies particularly to persons who have attained mastery of a field of knowledge, or to their specific outputs, like papers or books. It suggests expertise and authority in a specialized field. A scholarly study of the causes of war points to rigorous, expert work within a discipline.
So scholarly implies mastery in a specific field, more focused than learned.
Often, yes. It suggests specialization and recognized expertise.
Okay, and erudite, that one feels a bit more intense, maybe even a bit dusty.
It can sometimes carry that connotation.
Yeah.
Erudite is sometimes interchangeable with learned or scholarly, but it can imply a love of learning for its own sake, or a taste for out-of-the-way knowledge, things that are obscure or highly specialized. The dictionary also warns it can even suggest mere pedanticism.
Ah, showing off obscure knowledge.
Potentially, it suggests deep, often recondite or bookish learning. A mind filled with erudite and arcane lore captures that sense of deep, perhaps obscure knowledge. Its antonym, for the noun erudition, is illiteracy.
This raises an important question then. When you describe someone, are you highlighting that they have acquired a vast amount of academic knowledge through study, learned,
Right.
or that they have thoroughly mastered a specific field and are an authority, scholarly, or that they delight in obscure, profound, perhaps even arcane facts, maybe for the sheer love of knowing erudite?
Exactly. Each paints a different portrait of the intellectual. Choosing the right word adds that specific shade.
Okay, let's step into the legal world for a moment. We have words like lawful, legal, legitimate, and licit. On the surface, they all seem to mean something is permitted by law, doesn't it? Are these just four ways to say the same thing, or are there crucial distinctions? Like, when would you specifically use licit over plain old legal?
They are definitely distinct, and understanding them helps clarify the specific type of legal or even social conformance being discussed. Lawful is perhaps the broadest term. It may apply to conformity with law of any sort, such as natural law, divine law, common law, or canon law. The lawful sovereign is an example suggesting conformance with established, perhaps traditional or fundamental law. Its antonym is unlawful.
So, very broad. Could even be moral law.
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
It covers a wide range of rule systems. Now, legal applies more specifically to what is sanctioned by law or in conformity with the law, especially as it is written or administered by the courts. It focuses on enacted statutes and judicial rulings. Legal residence of the state refers to status according to specific written laws. Its antonym is illegal.
So legal is about the written code, the courts. More specific than lawful.
Correct.
What about legitimate? That seems to be used more broadly sometimes, outside of strict law.
It is. Legitimate may apply to a legal right or status, like a legitimate heir. But also, in extended use, it applies to a right or status supported by tradition, custom, or accepted standards, even if not explicitly codified in law. So, a perfectly legitimate question about finances might mean it's socially acceptable or reasonable, not necessarily strictly covered by a specific statute. It's broader than just formal law.
Ah, so it includes social acceptance or custom.
Yes, its antonyms are illegitimate or, when talking about power, arbitrary.
And licit, where does that specific term come in?
Licit applies to a strict conformity to the provisions of the law and applies especially to what is regulated by law. It's often used for things controlled by specific statutes or regulations, particularly those that might otherwise be forbidden. The example, the licit use of the drug by hospitals, refers to its use strictly according to specific legal regulations, perhaps contrasting with illicit use elsewhere.
So very specific compliance with regulations, especially for controlled things.
Exactly. Its antonym is illicit.
This really helps untangle things. It helps us understand if something is permitted by broad principles, lawful, sanctioned by the court system, legal, accepted by custom or common standards, legitimate, or strictly allowed under specific regulations, illicit.
Precisely. Nuance is key, especially in legal contexts.
All right, sticking with the legal theme, this one has always confused me. It seems like there are just so many terms for someone who practices law. We've got lawyer, counselor, barrister, counsel, advocate, attorney, solicitor. Goodness, are they just regional differences, like British versus American English? Or do they signify completely different roles and responsibilities within the legal profession? I mean, if I'm watching a British legal drama, I hear barrister and solicitor all the time, but almost never here in the U.S. What's the deal?
That's a fantastic point, and it highlights how subtle distinctions are baked into our language, especially when professions are involved. And yes, it absolutely highlights key differences between legal systems, particularly between the British and American contexts you mentioned. Let's start with lawyer. As the dictionary confirms, this is the broadest and most general term. It applies to anyone versed in the principles of law and authorized to practice law in courts or to act as a legal agent or advisor.
Okay, the umbrella term.
Exactly. So when we say the best defense lawyer in town, we're using a catch-all term for anyone engaged in the legal profession. Now, a counselor is generally understood as one who accepts court cases and gives advice on legal problems. Met with their legal counselor implies someone providing guidance and representation, often specifically in court.
So more focused on advice and court work.
Generally, yes. It emphasizes the advisory and litigation aspects. Now, here's where the regional distinctions become really apparent, particularly with the UK's what they call the bifurcated system. A barrister is the British equivalent of counselor. But the term specifically emphasizes court pleading. In English legal practice, barristers are the specialists permitted to plead cases in the higher courts. They're the courtroom advocates.
Ah, the ones in the wigs.
That's the image, yes. Barristers before the bench in wigs and robes evokes that specific role in courtroom advocacy in the UK.
Okay, so barristers plead in high courts in the UK. What about counsel? Sometimes you hear counsel for the defense.
Right. Counsel can be equivalent to counselor, but it's typically used collectively to designate one or more lawyers acting for a legal cause in court. So, counsel for the prosecution refers to the lawyer or team of lawyers representing that side in a specific case. It's often a more formal or collective noun in a courtroom setting.
An advocate, is that just another word for a lawyer?
It's similar in implication to counselor and barrister, but its use is often specific. The dictionary notes it's used chiefly in countries like Scotland or others, where the legal system is based on Roman law rather than English common law. So, acted as advocate in the trial signals a specific legal tradition or role, often focused on pleading a case.
Okay, moving back maybe more towards American usage. Attorney, often used like lawyer, right?
Very often, yes.
Oh.
They're frequently interchangeable in everyday speech. However, in precise use, attorney denotes a lawyer who acts as a legal agent for a client. This agency role covers matters like conveying property, settling wills, or defending or prosecuting civil law cases. The emphasis is on acting for the client in specific transactions or representations.
So more about agency and specific tasks.
In its strictest sense, yes. Attorney for the deceased is a perfect example of this specific agency role.
Which leaves solicitor, that's the other big British one, right? What's their role compared to a barrister?
Exactly. Solicitor is the British term, corresponding largely to attorney, but with a crucial emphasis on the transaction of legal business for a client as distinct from actual court pleading in higher courts. Solicitors are typically the first point of contact for clients. They handle things like contracts, wills, property conveyancing, give general legal advice, and prepare cases, doing the research, gathering evidence. They might appear in lower courts, but for higher court cases, they brief a barrister, who then does the pleading. Send his solicitor to negotiate on his behalf, captures their role as client-facing advisors and case preparers, often handling matters outside of the main courtroom drama.
That's incredible. Okay, so it means you absolutely shouldn't just call any legal professional a lawyer if you want to be precise. It depends entirely on their specific role within the legal system and, critically, their jurisdiction. The UK system, with its barristers handling high court advocacy and solicitors handling client relations and case prep, is a prime example.
Precisely.
Whereas in the US, attorney and lawyer are much more broadly overlapping, though attorney can carry that specific sense of agency. It's about choosing the term that accurately reflects their function and the legal context.
It truly is like understanding the different specialists within a field. Knowing the terms helps you understand the system.
All right, let's shift from law to, well, breaking the rules slightly. We all know that lying is wrong. It's a blunt term for direct dishonesty. But our language offers so many more nuanced ways to describe not telling the truth. Some seem less severe, others more artful, or even strategic. Expert, what are the different shades of untruth here? What do words like prevaricate, equivocate, palter, and fib reveal about the speaker's intent or the degree of deception involved?
This is a perfect illustration of how words can convey not just what is said, but how it's said and the underlying intent. It's a spectrum of untruthfulness, really, ranging from trivial to deliberately misleading. Lie is, as you said, the blunt term. It imputes direct dishonesty. The dictionary example, to lie under oath is a serious crime, clearly denotes a deliberate falsehood with serious intent, a straightforward fabrication meant to deceive.
No ambiguity there.
None at all.
Mhm.
Now, prevaricate softens the bluntness of lie by implying quibbling or evading or confusing the issue. It's a roundabout way of avoiding the truth, not necessarily by outright fabrication, but by being cagey, deliberately vague, or by changing the subject to dodge a direct answer.
Like beating around the bush to avoid telling the truth.
Exactly. During the hearings, the witness did his best to prevaricate, suggests they tried to obscure the truth through evasiveness rather than stating a direct falsehood.
Okay, so prevaricate is evasive. What about equivocate? How is that different?
Equivocate implies the using of ambiguous words in an attempt to mislead or deceive. This is about deliberate vagueness, using language that can be interpreted in more than one way to avoid commitment or to mislead, without technically stating a direct untruth.
Ah, like a politician's non-answer.
Precisely. Think of someone saying, I can neither confirm nor deny. They're using ambiguity. Equivocated, dodged questions, and generally misled her inquisitors. Clearly shows a calculated use of ambiguous language to mislead.
And polter. I don't think I use that one much.
It's less common now, but it implies the making of unreliable statements of fact or intention or insincere promises. This suggests dishonesty specifically in negotiation or commitment, often with a sense of bargaining in bad faith or betraying trust through unfulfilled or fake assurances. The example, a cade poltering with a naive young girl, implies deceptive promises or insincere intentions, perhaps trifling with someone's trust.
So being shifty or insincere in dealings.
That's the core of it, yes. Haggling deceitfully or making promises you don't intend to keep.
Okay, which leaves fib. That one sounds harmless.
Relatively speaking, yes. Fib applies to the telling of a trivial untruth. This is the least severe of the terms, often used for minor, harmless deceptions, or even for lighthearted storytelling that doesn't intend to cause serious harm. Fibbed about the price of the suit implies a small, perhaps inconsequential untruth, maybe to avoid embarrassment or a minor conflict. It's typically seen as less malicious.
A little white lie, basically.
Essentially, yes.
This spectrum of untruths is so insightful. It helps us recognize not just that someone isn't being truthful, but how they're doing it and the potential implications of their method. Are they being directly dishonest, lie, evasive, prevaricate, ambiguously misleading, equivocate, insincere in their promises, palter, or just telling a little white lie, fib?
Exactly. The choice of word conveys a great deal about the nature and perceived severity of the deception and the speaker's likely intent. It really changes your perception of the situation.
Our inner lives, our desires, our reactions to humor, our seriousness are so vividly expressed through a nuanced vocabulary. It's amazing, really. It's not enough to say you want something. How intensely do you want it, and what kind of laughter are you provoking? This next set really dives into the emotional landscape. When you really want something, you might say you long for it. That feels quite deep. But what about yearning or hankering or even pining? And how do hunger and thirst fit in when used metaphorically? They all mean strong desire, right? But what are the different emotional registers here?
They all indicate strong desire, yes, but each carries a distinct emotional flavor, suggesting different intensities, causes, or focuses of that desire. Let's start with long. This implies a wishing with one's whole heart for something remote or not easily attainable. It suggests a deep, often distant, and heartfelt desire. Long for some peace and quiet implies a deep, perhaps wistful, wish for something currently out of reach.
So deep and often for something far off.
That's the general feel. Now, yearn suggests an eager, restless, or painful longing. It often has a sense of strong, almost aching desire, perhaps more active or urgent than longing. Yearned for a career on the stage suggests an intense, driving ambition, possibly accompanied by a sense of restlessness until it's achieved. Its antonym is dread.
So more intense, maybe even painful?
Can be, yes. It often implies a stronger emotional agitation.
Okay. What about hanker? That sounds a bit more folksy.
It can sound that way. Hanker suggests the uneasy promptings of unsatisfied appetite or desire. It's often used for something more immediate or indulgent, a persistent craving. Always hankering for more money suggests a restless, perhaps slightly greedy desire for something tangible. It often implies a nagging want.
Like a craving you can't quite shake.
Exactly.
And pine, that sounds quite sad.
It usually is. Pine implies a languishing or a fruitless longing for what is impossible of attainment. It carries a sense of suffering, wasting away due to unfulfilled desire, often for something lost or unattainable. Pined for a long-lost love is the classic example, suggesting a deep sadness and weakening caused by the longing.
So longing that causes suffering, often for the impossible.
Precisely.
And the last two, hunger and thirst. Used metaphorically, of course.
Yes. Hunger, used this way, implies an insistent or impatient craving or a compelling need like that for food. It suggests an intense, almost physical drive or need for something non-material. Hungered for a business of his own conveys an intense, driving ambition, a powerful need for achievement or possession.
Like a primal need, but for something abstract.
That's the feeling. And thirst is very similar, suggesting a compelling need like that for liquid. It also implies intense craving, often associated with deprivation. Thirsted for absolute power suggests a consuming, perhaps dangerous craving born from a perceived lack.
This set of words is fascinating. It helps you precisely articulate the intensity and nature of a desire. Is it a quiet, deep longing for something distant? An aching, restless yearning? A nagging hankering for something specific? A sorrowful pining for the unattainable? Or an intense consuming hunger or thirst for power, knowledge, or success?
Exactly. Each word adds a specific emotional color to the desire.
Okay, let's talk about humor. If something makes us laugh, we instinctively call it funny. Simple enough. But when you look closely, there are so many other words for it. Laughable, ludicrous, ridiculous, comic, comical, risible, droll. What's the subtle art of humor hidden within these terms? Do they describe different kinds of laughter or different sources of amusement? Because I definitely use ridiculous when something is beyond funny, but I'm not sure I could explain why.
You're hitting on a great point. They absolutely describe different sources and types of laughter, ranging from a simple chuckle to outright scorn, and even a specific kind of intellectual or wry amusement. Let's start with laughable. As the dictionary suggests, it's the broadest term. It applies to anything that occasions laughter, whether intentionally or unintentionally. Her attempts at roller skating were laughable. Simply means they caused laughter without judgment on the intent. It just happened to be amusing.
Okay, the basic starting point, it makes you laugh.
Right. Now, ludicrous suggests absurdity or preposterousness that excites both laughter and scorn and sometimes pity. The humor here comes from blatant unreasonableness, something that is so out of place or nonsensical, it's both amusing and maybe contemptible.
Yeah.
A spy thriller with a ludicrous plot makes you laugh at its sheer absurdity, maybe even shaking your head.
So absurd to the point of being almost scornful.
Often carries that edge, yes.
And ridiculous. You said I use that when something's beyond funny. Why?
Ridiculous suggests extreme absurdity, foolishness, or contemptibility. It often implies something deserving of scorn or derision because it's so incredibly foolish, nonsensical, or beneath contempt. A ridiculous portrayal of wartime combat isn't just funny in an amusing way. It's likely seen as worthy of utter scorn or contempt for its foolishness or inaccuracy. It often carries a stronger negative judgment than ludicrous.
Ah, okay. So it's funny because it's so foolish or contemptible. Makes sense.
Exactly.
What about comic versus comical? They sound almost the same.
They're close, but nuance exists. Comic applies especially to that which arises thoughtful or wry amusement. This often relates to character or situation in art or literature, implying a more intellectual or nuanced humor that perhaps makes you smile or think. Falstaff is one of Shakespeare's great comic characters, refers to the kind of humor found in drama, often situational or character-based. Its antonym is tragic.
Okay, thoughtful amusement.
Whereas comical applies to that which arouses unrestrained spontaneous hilarity. This is for more immediate, overt, and uninhibited humor, something that is laugh-out-loud funny, perhaps visually or through actions. His comical appearance would have tested a saint, suggests something that provokes immediate, uncontrolled laughter, almost against your will. Its antonym is pathetic.
So comic is thoughtful, comical is belly laugh funny.
That's a good shorthand, yes.
And risible. Sounds formal.
It is more formal. Risible simply connotes that which causes laughter or is funny. It's essentially a more academic synonym for laughable, often used when describing something as worthy of laughter or ridicule in a slightly detached way. A risible account of their mishap just means it was an amusing story, perhaps told with a degree of formality.
Got it. Formal, laughable.
Right. Then there's droll. This suggests laughable qualities arising from oddness, quaintness, or deliberate waggishness. This implies a dry, subtle, or peculiar humor, often a bit quirky and understated, or perhaps even slightly mischievous or tongue-in-cheek. Amused us with droll stories of questionable veracity suggests a quiet, often understated, and perhaps slightly eccentric or sly humor.
Dry wit, maybe.
Quirkiness.
Exactly those things.
And finally, plain old funny.
Funny, while often interchangeable with the others, the dictionary notes it may suggest curiousness or strangeness as the basis of a laughable quality. It's broad and versatile, encompassing a wide range of things that elicit amusement, often from unexpectedness or oddity. And of course, it has that other sense, like had a funny feeling, meaning strange or peculiar. Its antonym is unfunny.
This is genuinely amazing. It means you can describe the exact kind of laughter something evokes. Is it a thoughtful, wry chuckle? Comic. Outright spontaneous hilarity? Comical. The kind of laughter that comes from something preposterous and scorn-worthy, ludicrous or ridiculous, or a subtle, quirky amusement droll? Precisely.
It gives you an incredible palette for describing humor, far beyond just funny. I'm definitely never using ridiculous quite the same way again.
Certainly adds layers to appreciation, doesn't it?
Okay, let's consider the opposite end of the spectrum from humor, maybe. Seriousness. Or rather, the lack of appropriate seriousness. In serious situations, some people might show lightness. But how does that differ from levity, or frivolity, or even flippancy? And then you have volatility and flightiness, which seem related. Are these just degrees of not being serious enough, or do they point to different kinds of inappropriateness or instability?
They definitely point to different kinds and degrees of lacking seriousness, often with negative implications depending on the context and the specific word used. Let's start with lightness. This implies a lack of weight and seriousness. It can sometimes suggest instability or careless heedlessness in character, mood, or conduct. The only bit of lightness in a dreary, ponderous drama might be a positive, a welcome relief. But use of a person's character, it might imply they don't take things seriously enough. Its antonym is seriousness.
So it can be neutral or slightly negative, depending on context.
Yes. Now, levity suggests trifling or unseasonable gaiety. This specifically points to humor or jocularity at an inappropriate time, injecting fun when seriousness is called for. Injected a moment of levity in the solemn proceedings highlights this misplaced or ill-timed humor. Its antonym is gravity.
Okay, so levity is specifically about misplaced humor.
Often, yes.
What about frivolity?
Frivolity suggests a tendency to trifling, to light, idle speech or conduct. It implies a general lack of seriousness and purpose, not just in one moment, but perhaps as a character trait, someone given to silly or unimportant things.
So more of a general disposition towards silliness.
Yes, a lack of substance or seriousness overall. Its antonyms are seriousness or staidness.
And flippancy. That one sounds definitely negative.
It usually is. Flippancy implies an unbecoming levity, especially in speaking of grave or sacred matters. It suggests disrespect through inappropriate lightness or casualness when dealing with serious subjects. Spoke of the bombing with annoying flippancy clearly shows disrespect and a failure to grasp the gravity of the situation. Its antonym is seriousness.
So lightness that crosses the line into disrespect.
Exactly.
And the last two, volatility and flightiness, they seem more about changeability.
They are, but linked to lightness. Volatility implies such lightness or fickleness of disposition as prevents long attention to any one thing. It suggests a changing, unstable nature, easily shifting moods or interests. The volatility of the public interest in foreign aid describes how quickly attention can shift. Applied to a person, it suggests unsteadiness.
Like easily distracted or changing your mind all the time.
Right. And flightiness implies extreme volatility that may approach loss of mental balance. It suggests an almost scatterbrained, unreliable, or capricious nature. It's a more extreme version of volatility.
Okay, like being really unreliable or ditzy.
That's the connotation. Its antonyms are steadiness or steadfastness.
What's fascinating here is how these words move from a general lack of seriousness, lightness, to specific, often negative implications. Misplaced humor, levity, general lack of purpose, frivolity, disrespect, flippancy, instability, volatility, or even unreliability, flightiness.
Precisely. It's a scale of inappropriateness or instability related to a lack of gravity.
Even when describing physical attributes or states of being, language offers incredibly specific tools. Things we might think are simple, like surfaces or firmness, actually have a whole vocabulary attached. Let's talk surfaces. A flat table, a level horizon. These words seem pretty straightforward, maybe even interchangeable, or do they tell us different things about a surface? If I ask for a level surface versus a flat one, am I asking for the same thing?
Not necessarily. While related, they describe distinct characteristics of surfaces, often with technical precision. Level specifically applies to a horizontal surface that lies on a line parallel with the horizon. It's about being horizontal, not tilted. The vast prairies are nearly level, means they are horizontally flat relative to the Earth's curve.
Okay, level means horizontal.
Exactly. Flat, however, applies to any surface devoid of noticeable curvatures, prominences, or depressions. It doesn't have to be horizontal, it just needs to lack bumps or curves. The work surface must be totally flat, means it needs to be uniform, without irregularities, regardless of its orientation. A wall can be flat, but not level.
Ah, okay, that's a key difference. Flat is about uniformity, level is about horizontal orientation.
Precisely.
What about plane? That sounds geometric.
It is. Plane applies to any real or imaginary flat surface in which a straight line between any 2 points on it lies wholly and continuously within that surface. It's a more geometric or theoretical concept of perfect flatness. The plane sides of a crystal uses it in this precise geometric sense.
So, like, mathematically flat?
You could say that.
And even. How does that fit in?
Even applies to a surface that is noticeably flat or level, or to a line that is observably straight. It suggests regularity and the absence of significant bumps, dips, or curves. It's often about visual uniformity. Trim the hedge so that it is even means making the top line straight or level and uniform. Its antonym is uneven.
So, visually uniform, lacking irregularities, similar to flat but maybe less strict.
Perhaps more focused on the observable uniformity or straightness.
And smooth. That's about texture. Right?
Yes. Smooth applies to a flat or even surface, especially free of irregularities that would cause friction. It focuses on texture, the absence of roughness. A smooth dance floor needs to be flat and even, but the emphasis is on the lack of friction. Its antonym is rough.
Okay, smooth is about the feel, the texture.
Correct. And finally, flush. This applies to a surface or line that forms a continuous surface or line with another surface or line. It implies alignment or contiguity, being on the same plane or line as something adjacent. The river's surface is now flush with the top of the banks, means they're at the same level.
So flush is about being aligned with something else.
Exactly.
Wow. This really shows the precision needed when, for instance, you're describing architectural plans or engineering specs or even just natural landscapes accurately. Flat isn't level, even isn't necessarily smooth, and flush is about alignment.
It's a great example of how technical precision is embedded in seemingly everyday words.
Okay, let's go from firm surfaces to the lack of firmness. From a limp handshake to a flimsy excuse, these words all suggest a lack of strength or substance. But what are the subtle differences? Do they describe different kinds of weakness or apply to different things?
They absolutely describe different kinds of weakness or lack of firmness, often with specific connotations or applications. Limp implies a lack or loss of stiffness or body and a resulting tendency to droop. Think of something that can't hold its shape. A faded flower on a limp stem is a classic image of lacking rigidity.
Okay, lack of stiffness, tendency to droop.
Yes. Now, floppy applies to something that sags or hangs limply, but is likely to suggest flexibility and a natural or intended lack of stiffness. Wore a large floppy garden hat that shaded her eyes suggests the hat is meant to be soft and flexible, not necessarily weak in a negative way.
So limp is usually negative loss of stiffness. Floppy can be intentional flexibility.
Often, yes.
What about flaccid and flabby? They sound similar and often negative.
They are similar and often negative. Flaccid applies primarily to living tissues and implies a loss of normal and especially youthful firmness or lack of force or energy or substance. It can be used metaphorically too, like a flaccid resolve that easily gave way, suggesting weakness of will. Its antonym is resilient.
So often biological, loss of firmness, or metaphorical weakness.
Right. Flabby, in its application to material things, is very close to flaccid. But applied to people or character, it also suggests spinelessness, spiritlessness, or lethargy. It's often used for physical softness due to lack of muscle tone, an overweight body, pudgy and slack, but also metaphorically for weak character, a flabby substitute for a hero. Its antonym is firm.
So flabby adds a layer of weakness of character or lack of tone, perhaps more than flaccid.
It often carries that stronger connotation of slackness or weakness, yes.
And flimsy. That's often used for excuses.
It is. Flimsy applies to something of such looseness of structure or insubstantiality of texture as to be unable to stand up under strain. Metaphorically, it stresses a lack of real worth or capacity for endurance. A flimsy excuse is one that easily falls apart under scrutiny because it lacks substance.
So weak structure, lack of substance, easily broken.
Exactly. And finally, sleazy. That sounds quite negative, maybe even immoral. It carries strong negative connotations. Sleazy implies a flimsiness due to cheap or careless workmanship and may stress a lack or inferiority of standards. It's often used for moral or aesthetic shabbiness, poor quality, or even disreputable character. A sleazy tale of second-rate intrigue suggests something cheap, tawdry, and perhaps morally questionable.
So flimsy, due to poor quality or low standards, often with a moral dimension.
That captures it well.
It's fascinating how these words describe not just physical properties like lack of stiffness, but also extend metaphorically to character, excuses, or quality. A flabby character, a flimsy argument, a sleazy operation.
Language constantly borrows from the physical to describe the abstract. It's one of its most powerful features.
Here's a pair we use all the time: liquid and fluid. Water is a liquid, but also a fluid. Air is a fluid. Are they always interchangeable? Or is there a distinction, especially when we use fluid metaphorically, like a fluid situation?
There's a definite distinction, both scientifically and metaphorically. Liquid applies specifically to substances that, like water, are only slightly compressible and are capable of conversion, under suitable conditions, into gases or solids. That's the physics definition. Metaphorically, it often implies softness or transparency or flow. Examples include a liquid tear rolled down the child's cheek, suggesting transparency, or the liquid song of the hermit thrush, suggesting smooth flow.
So specific state of matter or suggesting flowing, soft, clear qualities.
Yes. Its antonyms are solid and vaporous.
And fluid, how is that broader?
Fluid is applicable to both liquids and gases, anything that flows and takes the shape of its container. That's the key scientific distinction. But crucially, it can also be opposed to rigid, fixed, or unchangeable. Metaphorically, it applies to whatever is essentially unstable or tends to flow easily or freely. This is where it becomes really useful for abstract concepts. The fluid nature of international relations means they are changeable, adaptable, not fixed.
So fluid applies to anything that flows, including gases, and metaphorically to anything changeable or adaptable.
Exactly. Its primary antonym is solid, emphasizing the contrast with rigidity.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, fluid gives us a powerful way to describe abstract concepts like relationships, plans, or situations that are dynamic, adaptable, and changeable.
Precisely. Liquid can't really do that heavy lifting in the abstract realm. Fluid captures that sense of non-rigidity and potential for change much more effectively.
Okay, let's talk about energy and enthusiasm. When describing someone full of energy, we have a whole range of words. Lively, animated, vivacious, sprightly, even gay in its older sense. What makes each distinct? Are they just different levels of energy or different styles of expressing it?
They definitely suggest different styles and qualities of spiritedness, not just different amounts. Lively is perhaps the most general. It suggests briskness, alertness, or energy. A general sense of aliveness and quickness. A lively hour of news and information implies it was engaging and energetic. Its antonym is dull.
So basic energy and alertness.
Yes. Now, animated applies to what is spirited, active, and sparkling. It suggests a visible expression of life and energy, often in conversation or interaction. An animated discussion of current events implies visible energy, gestures, and active participation. Its antonyms are depressed or dejected.
So more outwardly expressive energy.
Often, yes. Visible spirit.
What about vivacious? That sounds very charismatic.
It does. Vivacious suggests an activeness of gesture and wit, often playful or alluring. It describes a charming, spirited personality often associated with women, full of life and attractive energy. A vivacious party hostess paints a picture of someone engaging, witty, and full of appealing energy. Its antonym is languid.
So lively, charm, and wit.
That's a good summary.
And sprightly. That makes me think of elves or older people who are still energetic.
It can certainly apply to older people, suggesting retained youthfulness. Sprightly suggests lightness and spirited vigor of manner or of wit. It often implies a cheerful, agile, almost bouncy energy. A tuneful, sprightly musical review suggests something light, cheerful, and energetic.
Light, cheerful, agile energy.
Okay. And finally, gay. In its traditional sense, distinct from modern usage related to orientation, gay stresses complete freedom from care and exuberantly overflowing spirits. It implies joyous, unburdened enthusiasm, a carefree celebration of life. The gay spirit of Paris in the 1920s captures this sense of exuberant, carefree joy. Its antonyms are grave or sober.
So pure, unburdened joy and exuberance.
In that specific historical sense, yes.
This vocabulary is fantastic for subtle character descriptions, isn't it? Or just appreciating the different ways people express joy and energy. Is someone generally energetic, lively, visibly expressive, animated, charmingly witty, vivacious, cheerfully agile, sprightly, or full of unburdened joy, gay?
It allows for much richer and more specific portrayals.
Okay, last one in this section. Words about life itself. Living, alive, animate, animated, vital. We tend to use these almost interchangeably, don't we? But a living artist isn't exactly the same as an animated cartoon. What gives? What are the subtle nuances here related to life and activity?
You've hit on a key point. They distinguish between the state of being alive, the property of life being brought to life, and the essential energy of life. Living applies to organic bodies having life as opposed to those from which life is gone. It focuses on the current state of being biologically alive. Living artists are artists who are currently alive as opposed to deceased ones. Its antonym is lifeless.
Okay, simply having biological life now.
Yes, alive as opposed to dead, and it's very similar to living, but the dictionary notes it typically follows the word it modifies. It emphasizes the state of not being dead. Toss the lobster into the pot while it's still alive emphasizes its current state of being not dead. Its antonyms are dead or defunct.
So very similar to living, just placement and emphasis on not being dead.
Pretty much.
What about animate versus animate?
Animate is used chiefly in direct opposition to inanimate to denote things alive or capable of life. It refers to the property of being alive or having life. A child seemingly afraid of every animate object means afraid of anything that possesses life, contrasting with inanimate objects like rocks or furniture. Its antonym is inanimate.
So animate is the category of things with life.
Correct. Whereas animated, as we saw before, but also here, is applied to that which becomes alive and active or is given motion simulating life. It suggests being brought to life or possessing vigorous motion that resembles life. An animated cartoon is the perfect example to drawings given the appearance of life and movement. Its antonym is inert.
So animate is having life, animated is being given the appearance of life or movement.
Exactly.
And finally, vital. That sounds important.
It implies importance, specifically relating to life. Vital implies the energy and especially the power to grow and reproduce that are characteristic of life. It focuses on the essential life functions, energy and sustainability. All of his vital functions seem normal, refers to the core biological processes necessary for life. It speaks to the force of life.
So relating to the essential energy and functions of life.
Yes, the core components that sustain life.
This helps us understand the subtle ways we describe existence, doesn't it? From simply being alive, living alive, to possessing the quality of life, animate, to being given movement, animated, to possessing essential life-sustaining qualities and energy, vital.
It shows how language dissects even fundamental concepts like life into different aspects.
Our language has such a rich set of words to describe how we are affected by circumstances, how we give or receive, and how we persuade or mislead others. These are crucial for understanding dynamics in any relationship, any system, or, well, any political discussion, too. Okay, let's talk about being vulnerable or likely to experience something, often negative. If you're liable to fall, does that mean the same as being prone to accidents or susceptible to colds? These seem very similar on the surface. How do they differ in explaining why someone might experience something adverse?
They seem similar, but they pinpoint different reasons for that vulnerability or likelihood. Is it due to position, lack of protection, natural tendency, inherent constitution, responsiveness? Each word gives a different answer. Liable implies a possibility or probability of incurring something because of position, nature, or action of forces beyond one's control. It often suggests a legal responsibility or a probable risk due to circumstances. Unless you're careful, you're liable to fall suggests a probable risk due to the situation. UGIC path. It can also mean legally obligated. Its antonyms are exempt or immune.
Okay, so probability of risk, often due to external factors or position.
Yes. Now, open stresses ease of access and a lack of protective barriers. It suggests vulnerability specifically due to a lack of defense or easy accessibility. A claim that is open to question means it's not defended against questioning. It's accessible for challenge. Its antonym is closed.
So vulnerable because it's undefended or accessible.
Right. Exposed takes that a step further and suggests a lack of protection or powers of resistance against something actually present or threatening. It implies being directly vulnerable to a current active threat because of a lack of shelter or defense. The town's exposed position makes it impossible to defend, highlights vulnerability to an immediate threat.
So open is generally accessible, exposed is vulnerable to a specific present threat.
That's a good distinction.
Okay, what about subject?
Okay.
Subject to change.
Subject implies an openness, for any reason, to something that must be suffered or undergone. It suggests being under the control, influence, or necessity of something external. All reports are subject to editorial revision, means they must undergo revision. They are under that requirement or control. Its antonym is exempt.
So under the power or necessity of something else.
Yes.
And prone, I said prone to accidents.
Prone stresses a natural tendency or propensity to incur something. It implies an inherent inclination or predisposition towards something, often negative. A person who is prone to accidents suggests it's part of their nature. They just tend to have accidents more often.
So an internal tendency.
Exactly. Susceptible is similar, but maybe more specific. It implies conditions existing in one's nature or individual constitution that make one unusually open to something, especially something deleterious. It suggests an inherent weakness or predisposition, often biological or psychological. Young children are susceptible to colds. Points to their developing immune systems, making them inherently more vulnerable. Its antonym is immune.
So prone is a general tendency. Susceptible is a specific inherent vulnerability.
That's a good way to capture the nuance.
Lastly,
Sensitive.
sensitive implies a readiness to respond to or be influenced by forces or stimuli. It focuses on responsiveness, which can be a strength or a vulnerability depending on the context. Her eyes are sensitive to light means they react readily to light, which is a vulnerability in bright conditions. It's about the degree of reaction to stimuli. Its antonym is insensitive.
What's fascinating here is how these words help diagnose the reason for vulnerability. Is it external position, liable, lack of defenses, open, exposed, being under control, subject, an internal tendency, prone, an inherent weakness, susceptible, or responsiveness, sensitive?
It gives you a precise vocabulary for risk assessment and understanding vulnerability.
Let's shift to a more positive topic, giving. Someone who gives a lot is often called generous, but the dictionary also offers liberal, bountiful,
Yeah.
and munificent. Are these just synonyms for generous, or do they describe different styles or scales of giving? They definitely describe different qualities and scales of giving, highlighting different aspects of the giver or the gift. Liberal, in this context, distinct from the political sense we'll discuss later, suggests open-handedness in the giver and largeness in the thing or amount given. It focuses on the quantity and the freedom or lack of restraint in giving. A teacher liberal in bestowing praise suggests they give praise freely and perhaps plentifully. Its antonym is close, as in close-fisted.
So free and large in quantity.
Yes. Generous stresses warm-hearted readiness to give more than the size or importance of the gift might strictly require. It emphasizes the spirit of giving, the warmth and willingness behind the act, rather than just the amount. A friend's generous offer of assistance highlights the kind, willing spirit behind the offer. Its antonym is stingy.
So liberal is about quantity, generous is about spirit.
That's a key distinction, yes.
What about bountiful? That sounds like a lot.
It does. Bountiful suggests lavish, unremitting generosity in giving or providing. It implies a continuous, abundant supply, like a harvest. Bountiful grandparents spoiling the children suggests they give lavishly and perhaps continuously. It emphasizes abundance and ongoing provision.
So abundant and continuous giving.
Right. And finally, munificent suggests splendid or princely lavishness in giving. It implies grand, often formal, and very large-scale generosity, often associated with patrons or royalty. The queen was especially munificent to her favorite. It implies giving on a grand, impressive, almost regal scale. It suggests magnificence in giving.
Wow, okay. Like large-scale, impressive patronage.
Exactly.
This is great. It helps us describe not just the amount of a gift, but the spirit behind it. Generous, the freedom with which it's given. Liberal, its abundance. Bountiful, or its sheer grandeur. Munificent.
It adds richness to describing acts of giving.
Okay, we touched on liberal in the giving sense. Now let's look at the political and social context. These terms, liberal, progressive, advanced, radical, are thrown around constantly in discussions about politics and social change. Sometimes they're used as praise, sometimes as insults. How can we use them with precision, ensuring we understand their specific ideological positions as defined here, rather than just reacting to the labels?
That's a crucial area where precise word choice can prevent miscommunication and enhance understanding, especially in public discourse. These terms, as defined in the dictionary, delineate specific ideological stances relating to tradition and change. It's important to grasp their core meaning, setting aside the often loaded connotations they pick up in debate. Let's revisit liberal. In this context, it implies a greater or less degree of emancipation from convention, tradition, or dogma. It's a broad term. The dictionary points out it may suggest either pragmatism and tolerance, a positive framing, or conversely, unorthodoxy, extremism, and laxness, a more negative framing, implying a lack of traditional restraint.
So it really depends on your perspective.
The interpretation often does, yes. The core is moving away from established norms. A politician's liberal tendencies simply points to this characteristic. Its antonym here is given as authoritarian.
Okay. How does progressive compare? That sounds inherently positive, like progress.
It often carries that implication. Progressive is likely to imply a comparison with what is backward or reactionary, and a readiness to forsake old methods and beliefs for new ones that hold more promise. It focuses on forward movement and improvement, a belief in human progress, and adopting new ideas that seem better than the old. Went to the most progressive school her parents could find, suggests embracing new, promising approaches.
So, focused on moving forward, embracing the new.
Yes, its antonym is reactionary.
And advanced, advanced ideas.
Advanced applies to what is or seems to be ahead of its proper time. This can connote liberalism and mental daring, suggesting innovation and foresight. However, the dictionary also cautions it can suggest extreme foolhardiness and experimental impracticality. An idea might be too far ahead to work.
So, could be visionary, could be impractical.
Exactly. A man with advanced ideas might be a visionary or someone whose ideas are simply premature or unworkable. Its antonym is conservative.
Finally, radical. That one sounds like it means big changes.
It does. Radical is likely to imply willingness to destroy the institutions which conserve the ideas or policies condemned. It comes close to revolutionary in meaning. This term suggests a desire for fundamental, far-reaching change, often by dismantling existing structures entirely and getting to the root, which is what radical means, of an issue. An idea conceived by a group of radical reformers points to a desire for a complete overhaul.
So fundamental change, maybe even tearing down the old system.
That's the strong implication. Its antonym is also conservative.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, understanding these distinctions is so crucial for nuanced political discourse. It allows you to accurately describe beliefs and proposals. Are they seeking moderate change from tradition, liberal, forward movement based on new ideas, progressive ideas ahead of their time, advanced, or fundamental root and branch transformation, radical?
Exactly. It helps you avoid just lumping all non-traditional viewpoints together and instead recognize the specific philosophy of change embedded in each word, essential for being truly well-informed.
How do we talk about, well, not stopping something, permitting actions? We have words like let, allow, permit, suffer, leave. How do we differentiate between simply letting something happen and actively permitting it? Is there a difference in implication, maybe about willingness or authority?
Yes, there are definite differences in the degree of willingness, authority, or even awareness implied by each word. Let is interesting. It may imply a positive giving of permission, but the dictionary says it more often implies failure to prevent, either through inadvertence and negligence or through lack of power or effective authority.
The goalie let the ball get by her implies a failure to stop it, not necessarily permission. It can suggest oversight or inability.
So often about not stopping rather than active agreement. Frequently, yes. Now, allow implies little more than a forbearing to prohibit or to exert this power. It suggests a passive acceptance or non-interference. You could stop it, but you choose not to. A teacher who allows her pupils to do as they like suggests she refrains from prohibiting their actions. Its antonym is inhibit.
So passive acceptance, choosing not to interfere.
That's the core idea. Permit, however, implies express willingness or acquiescence. This is a more formal or active granting of permission. The park permits powerboats on the lake, suggests an official rule or express consent. Its antonyms are prohibit or forbid.
Okay, so permit is active, formal permission. Let and allow are more passive or about failure to stop.
Generally, yes.
What about suffer? That sounds archaic. Suffer the little children.
It is somewhat archaic in this sense, but the dictionary includes it. Suffer can be close to allow, or it may distinctively imply indifference or reluctance. It suggests tolerating something, perhaps without enthusiasm. Suffered themselves to be photographed implies they allowed it, maybe reluctantly or passively. It suggests putting up with someone.
Tolerating without necessarily wanting to.
Right. And finally, leave. This stresses the implication of non-interference in letting or allowing or permitting. It can also suggest the departure of the person who might interfere, thereby creating space for the action. Left them to resolve the matter among themselves implies removing oneself from the situation to allow them to act freely.
So creating space for action by non-interference or absence.
Exactly.
This really helps articulate the subtle differences between explicit permission, permit, passive acceptance, allow, suffer, unintentional allowance or failure to stop, and creating space through non-interference, leave.
It clarifies the nature of the non-forbiddance.
Okay, let's look at words describing how people draw others into something, but often with a negative connotation leading them astray, maybe into danger or wrongdoing. Words like lure, entice, inveigle, decoy, tempt, seduce. What are the specific methods of persuasion or manipulation involved with each? Is there a subtle scale of malice here, or just different tactics being employed?
There's definitely a scale, and each word pinpoints a specific tactic of attraction and deception, often leading to undesirable outcomes for the person being drawn in. Lure implies a drawing into danger, evil, or difficulty through attracting and deceiving. The focus is on using an attractive bait to lead someone into peril or harm they might otherwise avoid. Lured naive investors with get-rich-quick schemes clearly indicates a deceptive attraction towards a harmful situation. Its antonyms are revolt and repel.
So, attraction towards danger through deception.
Yes. Entice suggests a drawing by artful or adroit means. This is often about skill or cleverness in attraction, using appealing promises or features, not necessarily for grave danger, but certainly for desired outcome. Advertising designed to entice new customers uses skillful methods to attract, playing on desires. Its antonym is scare-off.
So, skillful attraction may be less dangerous than lure.
Often, yes. More about skillful persuasion through appeal.
What about inveigle? How does that work?
Inveigle implies an enticing by cajoling or flattering. The specific manipulative method here is using smooth talk, coaxing, insincere compliments, or persistent persuasion, often to get someone to do something they wouldn't otherwise agree to. Inveigled her suitor into proposing marriage highlights the use of flattery and soft, perhaps deceptive, persuasion.
Using flattery or coaxing.
Precisely.
And decoy.
Like a duck decoy. Exactly like that. Decoy implies a luring away or into entrapment by artifice and false appearances. This term focuses on trickery, specifically for the purpose of capture or leading someone into a trap, often by creating a distraction or a false target that seems safe or attractive. The female bird attempted to decoy us away from her nest describes a deceptive maneuver using a false appearance to protect something.
Trickery using false appearances to trap or mislead.
Yes.
Then there's tempt. That seems more internal.
It often is. Tempt implies the exerting of an attraction so strong that it overcomes the restraints of conscience or better judgment. This focuses on an internal struggle, where an external attraction is so powerful it challenges one's moral or rational boundaries, often preying on weaknesses or desires. Tempted him to abandon his diet describes that powerful internal pull against one's better judgment.
The battle of willpower.
Right. And finally, seduce. This implies a leading astray by persuasion or false promises. While it often have romantic or sexual connotations, more broadly it's associated with moral corruption or leading someone into a wrong course of action through manipulative promises or inducements. Seduce young runaways into the criminal life perfectly illustrates this leading astray through deceit and corruption, often exploiting vulnerability.
So leading astray into wrongdoing through persuasion or false promises.
That's the core of it.
So what does this all mean? Each word describes a specific kind of manipulative influence. Is it baiting into danger, lure, skillful attraction, entice, using flattery, inveigle, trickery, decoy, overcoming willpower, tempt, or leading into moral corruption, seduce?
It's like a toolkit for understanding the different strategies of negative influence.
Let's talk about setting boundaries. We talk about limiting things like time or speed or restricting access. We also have circumscribe and confine. What are the different ways we impose boundaries according to these words? Do they imply different kinds of boundaries or different effects?
They do. They describe different methods of setting bounds, focusing on endpoints, scope, precision, or enclosure. Limit implies the setting of a point or line, as in time, space, speed, or degree, beyond which something cannot or is not permitted to go. It focuses on defining an endpoint or outer boundary. Visits are limited to 30 minutes, sets a clear endpoint in time. Its antonym is widen.
Okay, setting a maximum point or line.
Yes. Restricts suggests a narrowing or tightening or restraining within, or as if within an encircling boundary. It focuses on reducing scope or freedom of movement within bounds. Laws intended to restrict the freedom of the press implies tightening controls, narrowing the scope of what's allowed.
So limit is an outer boundary. Restrict is about narrowing within boundaries.
That's a good way to see it.
What about circumscribe? That sounds very precise.
It is. Circumscribe stresses a restriction in every direction and by clearly defined boundaries. It suggests drawing a precise circle around something, defining its limits comprehensively. The work of the investigating committee was carefully circumscribed, implies its scope and powers were very precisely and narrowly defined. Its antonyms are dilate or expand.
So very precise, all-encompassing boundary.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And finally, confine implies a holding within an actual or imaginary boundary that must not be passed, and often resulting cramping, fettering, or hampering. It suggests being held within limits, often against one's will, or with negative consequences for freedom. Our freedom of choice was confined by finances implies being trapped or hampered by financial limits.
So being held inside boundaries, often with a sense of restriction or being trapped.
Yes, often with that feeling of imprisonment or lack of freedom.
Choosing the right word here really helps you understand the nature of the boundary. Is it a simple endpoint, limit, a reduction of scope, restrict a precise perimeter, circumscribe, or a restrictive enclosure, confine?
It defines how the boundary operates and feels.
Last group in this section, moving secretly. Ones like lurk, spelk, slink, sneak, they all mean moving furtively, right? But what's the specific feeling or intention behind each one? Do they imply different reasons for hiding or moving secretly?
They definitely imply different intentions and feelings, ranging from menacing to fearful to simply trying to avoid notice. Lurk implies a lying in wait in a place of concealment and often suggests an evil intent. It focuses on a hidden, menacing presence waiting for an opportunity, often sinister. Suspicious men lurking in alleyways creates a sense of threat and hidden danger.
Okay, lurking sounds threatening.
Often does. Skulk suggests furtive movement and cowardice or fear or sinister intent. It implies a shifty, perhaps fearful, hiding or moving about, trying to avoid being seen, possibly out of guilt or malice. Spied something skulking in the shadows suggests something moving furtively, perhaps fearfully, or with bad intentions.
So shifty, maybe fearful hiding.
That's the feel.
What about slink?
Slink implies a stealthiness in moving to escape attention, and may connote sly caution. It focuses on quiet, often unnoticed movement, usually to get away or avoid confrontation, sometimes with a sense of shame or slyness. During the festivities, I slunk away implies quietly leaving unnoticed, perhaps feeling awkward or wanting to escape.
When a state, maybe a bit ashamed or sly.
Yes. And finally, sneak. This may add an implication of entering or leaving a place or evading a difficulty by furtive, indirect, or underhanded methods. It focuses on secretive entry or exit, or using stealth to get around rules or obstacles. He sneaked out after the others had fallen asleep, implies quiet, secret departure.
Secret entry exit or evasion.
Right.
This set of words is great for characterization. It highlights the intent behind the secretive movement. Is it menacing, lurk, fearful or shifty, skulk, quiet escape, slink, or secret comings and goings, sneak?
It adds psychological depth to the description of movement.
Finally, let's explore words that precisely capture physical attributes, actions of force, or even the nature of good fortune. It's about getting granular with description, whether you're talking about sounds, the way someone looks, or displays of wealth. Okay, describing body types. Thin is simple, but wow, we have so many descriptive options. Lean, spare, lanky, gaunt, raw boned, scrawny, skinny. What distinct pictures do these words paint? They can't all just mean not fat, can they? They seem to carry judgments or implications about health or build.
You're absolutely right. They go far beyond just not fat, adding context about build, health, cause, and even connotation. Let's start with lean. This stresses lack of fat and of curving contours. It often implies a positive, healthy, perhaps athletic build, trim, and muscular without excess fat. A lean racehorse suggests fitness and lack of superfluous weight. Its antonym is fleshy.
Okay, lean sounds healthy, athletic.
Often does. Spare suggests leanness resulting from abstemious living or constant exercise. It implies a disciplined, almost ascetic thinness, perhaps wiry and tough. The spare form of a long-distance runner suggests efficiency and lack of excess, achieved through discipline. Its antonym is corpulent.
So lean is healthy, lack of fat. Spare is disciplined, thinness.
Good distinction.
What about lank and lanky? They sound similar.
They are related. Lank implies tallness as well as leanness. It often suggests somewhat awkwardly tall and thin, perhaps with straight drooping features. The pale, lank limbs of a prisoner of war combines thinness with tallness, perhaps suggesting weakness.
Tall and thin? Maybe awkward.
Yes, and lanky specifically suggests awkwardness and loose-jointedness as well as thinness. It's often used for young, gangly individuals who haven't quite grown into their height. A lanky youth, all arms and legs, perfectly captures that awkward, tall, thin stage. Its antonym is burly.
Okay, lanky is specifically awkward, tall, and thin.
Usually, yes.
Now for the more negative ones, gaunt sounds pretty bad.
It usually implies ill health. Gaunt implies marked thinness or emaciation, as from overwork, undernourishment, or suffering. It suggests severe, unhealthy thinness, often with sharp features. Her gaunt face showed the strain of poverty clearly links the thinness to suffering and lack.
Definitely unhealthy thinness.
Yes. Raw-boned is interesting because it suggests a large, ungainly build without implying undernourishment. It focuses on visible bones in a large frame, suggesting ruggedness rather than weakness. Raw-boned lumberjacks squeezed into the booth implies large, perhaps bony, but strong figures.
So large frame, visible bones, but not necessarily weak.
Correct.
And the last two, scrawny and skinny.
Both imply undesirable thinness. Scrawny suggests extreme thinness and slightness or shrunkenness. It often implies a weak, underdeveloped, or unattractively bony physique. A scrawny kitten implies pitiable thinness and weakness. Its antonyms include brawny, fleshy, obese.
So really thin, maybe weak and underdeveloped.
Yes. And skinny implies leanness that suggests deficient strength and vitality. It often carries a slightly negative connotation, implying unhealthy or unattractive thinness, perhaps lacking muscle tone. Skinny fashion models is an example where the term might be used, sometimes critically. Its antonym is fleshy.
So thin in a way that suggests weakness or lack of vitality.
That's the common implication.
This deep dive really shows us that thin is just the starting point. These words add context, cause, build, and even judgment to appearance. Are they athletically lean, aesthetically spare, awkwardly lanky, sufferingly gaunt, ruggedly raw-boned, weakly scrawny, or unhealthily skinny?
It's a masterclass in descriptive precision regarding physique.
Okay, let's talk about moving things upward. We all know how to lift something, but what if we need to describe specific ways of moving upward? We have raise, rear, elevate, hoist, heave, boost. Do these imply different amounts of effort, different mechanisms, or different intentions?
They certainly do. They differentiate the type of upward movement based on effort, mechanism, direction, or even metaphorical intent. Lift is the general term. It usually implies exerting effort to overcome the resistance of weight. It's the basic act of making something go up. Lift the chair while I vacuum is a simple, direct instruction. Its antonym is lower.
Okay, basic upward movement against weight.
Yes, raise carries an implication of bringing something up to the vertical or to a high position. It's more general than lift and can be about orientation as much as height. Soldiers raising a flagpole is about bringing it to a vertical position. It can also be less effortful than lift sometimes.
So bringing upright or high may be less about effort.
Can be. Rear, the dictionary notes, can sometimes replace raise, but it can also mean something raises itself upwards. It often implies an ascending motion, maybe of a large object or animal. A steeple rearing into the sky suggests it's ascending prominently. A horse can rear up.
So ascending motion, sometimes self-propelled.
That's the idea.
What about elevate? That sounds like lifting, but maybe fancier.
It can replace lift or raise, especially when exalting or enhancing is implied. It's often used metaphorically for improving status, mood, or quality. Elevated the musical taste of the public uses it metaphorically for improvement. Its antonym is also lower.
So lifting with an implication of improvement or enhancement.
Often, yes.
And hoist and heave, they sound like hard work.
They do imply effort. Hoist implies the lifting of something heavy, especially by mechanical means. It suggests considerable weight and often the use of equipment like cranes or pulleys. Hoisted the cargo on board suggests using machinery for heavy lifting.
Heavy lifting, often with machines.
Right. Heave implies lifting with a great effort or strain. It suggests exertion, force, and difficulty in lifting something heavy manually. Struggled to heave the heavy crate emphasizes the immense effort involved.
Manual heavy lifting with great strain.
Exactly.
Finally, boost. Like giving someone a boost over a fence.
Precisely. Boost suggests assisting someone or something to climb or advance by a push, usually from below or behind. It applies providing help to move upward. Boosted his brother over the fence is the perfect example of providing that upward push.
Assistance from below.
Yes.
This raises an important question then. When describing upward movement, are you talking about a simple act against weight? Lift. Bringing upright, raise. Self-ascending, rear. Enhancing, elevate. Using machines for heavy things, hoist, manual, strain, heave in. Or providing assistance, boost.
Knowing the difference allows you to describe the action with much greater accuracy and vividness.
Let's talk about sound. Beyond just loud, how do we describe different kinds of intense sounds? We have words like stentorian, ear-splitting, raucous, strident. What specific qualities of volume, tone, or effect do these words capture?
They capture very specific qualities, moving beyond simple volume to describe the tone, harshness, and impact of the sound. Loud is the general term. It applies to any volume above normal and may suggest undue vehemence or obtrusiveness. A loud, obnoxious person implies volume combined with unpleasantness. Its antonyms are low or soft.
Basic high volume.
Yes. Now, stentorian is chiefly used of voices and implies great power and range. It suggests a booming, authoritative, far-reaching voice like that of a classical orator, stentor from Homer. An actor with a stentorian voice suggests a powerful, projecting voice suitable for the stage.
Powerful, booming voice.
Ear-splitting implies loudness that is physically oppressive and shrilly discomforting. It focuses on the painful or uncomfortable physical sensation caused by extreme, often high-pitched volume. The ear-splitting sound of a siren emphasizes the physical discomfort it causes.
Painfully loud, often shrill.
Exactly.
What about raucous and strident? They both sound harsh.
They do, but in different ways. Raucous implies a loud, harsh, grating tone, especially a voice, and may suggest rowdiness or disorder. It describes a rough, jarring, unpleasant sound. A barroom filled with the raucous shouts of drunken revelers combines harsh sound with a sense of disorder.
Harsh, grating, often rowdy sound.
Yes. Strident implies a rasping, discordant, but insistent quality, especially a voice. It describes a harsh, shrill, grating sound that is also insistent or commanding in an unpleasant way. The strident voices of hecklers suggest harsh, grating sounds that are also aggressively insistent.
Harsh, grating, and insistently unpleasant.
That captures it well.
This is incredibly useful for describing soundscapes or voices. You're not just saying it was loud, but describing the quality and impact of the sound. Was it powerful, stentorian, physically painful, ear-splitting, harsh and rowdy, raucous, or gratingly insistent, strident?
It adds a whole new dimension to describing auditory experiences.
Okay, let's revisit fortune, but this time, good fortune. We all want to be lucky, right? I certainly do. But what's the difference between being fortunate or having something happy happen by chance, or even having something providential occur? Do these words assign different sources or implications to good outcomes beyond just random chance?
They certainly do. This group is fascinating because it highlights the varying sources and implications we attribute to good outcomes, ranging from pure chance to what might seem divinely guided or remarkably opportune. Lucky stresses the agency of chance in bringing about a favorable result. It emphasizes randomness and unpredictability. The outcome was purely accidental good fortune. The lucky day I met my future wife suggests a random, fortunate occurrence, a happy accident. Its antonyms are luckless or unlucky.
Pure random chance.
Yes. Fortunate suggests having a good effect or bringing about success beyond normal expectations. This often implies a more sustained or significant good outcome, though still largely chance-related. It feels a bit more impactful or beneficial than just a lucky break. Have been fortunate in my business investments suggests a consistent, beneficial series of outcomes, perhaps beyond what mere luck might explain, but still attributed to fortune. Its antonym is unfortunate.
So significant good results, still chance, but maybe more sustained.
That's often the implication.
And happy in this context, like a happy accident.
Yes. Happy combines the implications of lucky and fortunate with its more common meaning of being blessed or experiencing joy. It applies a joyful outcome, potentially unexpected, that brings a sense of well-being and contentment. A life that has been a series of happy accidents combines the element of chance with a resulting positive, joyful feeling. Its antonym is unhappy.
Chance leading to joy.
Exactly. And finally, providential. This more definitely implies the help or intervention of a higher power in the coming of good or the averting of evil fortune. It suggests a divinely guided or extremely opportune, perhaps even miraculous outcome, where circumstances align perfectly, often to prevent disaster. It was providential that rescuers arrived in the nick of time, implies a timely, almost perfectly orchestrated intervention.
So implying divine intervention or perfect timing.
That's the strong suggestion.
What's fascinating here is how we attribute good outcomes from pure random chance, lucky, to significant chance benefits, fortunate, to joyful chance, happy, to something almost divinely orchestrated or perfectly timed, providential.
The choice of words subtly shifts the perceived source and even the emotional or spiritual weight of that good fortune.
So the next time I win the lottery, I'll have to decide if I was just lucky or if it felt providential, though I suspect lucky might be more accurate.
One can always hope.
Okay, let's talk about wealth and its display. If something is expensive and fancy, our first thought might be to call it luxurious. But what do sumptuous and opulent add to that description? Do they just mean more luxurious, or are there distinct differences in the way that richness is presented or experienced?
No, they're definitely not just escalations of luxurious. They differentiate the nature and purpose of that display of wealth and magnificence. Luxurious applies to what is choice and costly and suggests gratification of the senses and desire for comfort. It focuses on the personal comfort, high quality, and sensory pleasure derived from wealth, usually for the direct benefit of the person experiencing it. A millionaire's luxurious penthouse apartment suggests comfort, high-quality materials, and sensory enjoyment for the resident. It's about enjoying the wealth personally.
Okay, personal comfort and sensory pleasure from wealth.
Yes. Now, sumptuous applies to what is overwhelmingly or extravagantly rich, splendid, or luxurious. This suggests grandeur and lavishness on a large scale, often in terms of a feast, a setting, or an elaborate display that is impressive to behold. An old-fashioned grand hotel with a sumptuous lobby evokes a sense of impressive, magnificent richness designed to awe the beholder with its scale and splendor.
Grandeur and splendor on a large scale.
Exactly. And finally, opulent. This suggests a flaunting of luxuriousness, luxuriance, or costliness. It implies a deliberate, often ostentatious display of wealth or abundance, specifically intended to impress others, demonstrate power, or even intimidate. It's wealth put on display. An opulent wedding intended to impress the guests highlights the intentional showiness and grand scale of the display, often for social signaling or showing off.
Ah, deliberate, showy display of wealth to impress.
That's the key implication.
That's a huge distinction. These words allow us to distinguish between simply being comfortable in wealth, luxurious, experiencing grand and magnificent splendor, sumptuous, or witnessing a deliberate, often showy display of power or status through riches, opulent.
It's not just about how much money was spent, but how it's presented and why. It totally changes the vibe of the description.
All right, a rather grim topic to end on, but important for precise description. Severe injuries. Words like maim, cripple, mutilate, batter, mangle. These all sound terrible, obviously, but when should we use one over the other? Do they describe different types of injury or damage?
They do. Each word describes a specific type of severe injury or damage, often highlighting the nature of the violence or its effect on the body or object. Maim implies the loss or injury of a limb or member, usually through violence, resulting in permanent disability of that part. A swimmer maimed by a shark clearly indicates the loss or severe damage of a limb.
Loss or severe injury of a limb.
Yes. Cripple implies the loss or serious impairment of an arm or leg, making locomotion difficult or impossible. It's broader than maim regarding the specific limb, but focuses on the resulting immobility or severe functional impairment. The fall crippled her for life, emphasizes the loss of use of limbs, resulting in disability.
Loss or impairment of limbs causing disability.
Right. Mutilate implies the cutting off or removal of an essential part of a person or thing, thereby impairing its completeness, beauty, or function. This can apply to objects too, not just bodies. A poignant drama mutilated by inept acting uses it metaphorically for ruining something essential. On a person, it means removing a part, damaging wholeness.
Removing an essential part, damaging completeness, can be metaphorical.
Correct.
What about batter and mangle? They sound particularly violent.
They imply significant force. Batter implies a pounding with series of blows that bruises deeply, deforms, or mutilates. It focuses on repeated forceful impact causing widespread damage. A ship battered by fierce storms at sea emphasizes the repeated impacts.
Repeated blows causing deep bruising or deformation.
Yes. And mangle implies a tearing or crushing that leaves deep, extensive wounds or lacerations. It focuses on severe, messy, tearing or crushing damage, often resulting in distorted form. Thousands are mangled every year by auto accidents, suggests severe tearing, crushing injuries.
Severe tearing or crushing damage.
Exactly.
The choice of word here really conveys the specific nature of the injury and its impact. Is it a lost limb?
Yeah.
Disabling limb injury, cripple, removal of a part, mutilate, damage from repeated blows, batter, or severe crushing and tearing, mangle.
It paints a much clearer, albeit often grim, picture of the damage inflicted.
Okay, one final group. When you believe something strongly, you might maintain your position. But how does that differ from asserting it or defending it or trying to vindicate or justify it? What are the various ways we uphold a belief, a claim, or a right, according to these words?
These words describe different ways of upholding something believed to be true or right, focusing on conviction, declaration, protection, proof, or explanation. Maintain stresses firmness of conviction, The dictionary suggests it implies persistent or insistent upholding of cause, and may even suggest aggressiveness or obtrusiveness in holding onto that belief despite opposition. Steadfastly maintained his client's innocence, emphasizes persistent belief in statement.
Holding firm to a belief persistently.
Yes. Assert implies stating something positively or dogmatically, often with the expectation of acceptance or belief, even without proof. It's about forceful declaration.
Forceful statement, expecting belief.
Right. Defend implies repelling attack or maintaining against challenge. It focuses on protecting a belief, claim, or person from opposition or criticism.
Protecting from attack or challenge.
Exactly.
And vindicate versus justify. They seem related to proving something right.
They are, but subtly different. Vindicate implies clearing something or someone from an accusation, suspicion, or doubt, often by providing proof of innocence or correctness. It's about proving something true or right after it's been questioned or attacked.
Clearing from accusation, proving right after doubt.
Yes. Justify, on the other hand, implies showing something to be just or right, often by providing reasons, explanations, or evidence for why an action, decision, or belief is correct or reasonable. It's about providing the rationale.
Showing the reasons why something is right or reasonable.
Precisely.
This raises an important question. When upholding something, are you simply stating your firm belief, maintain, forcefully declaring it, assert, protecting it from challenge, defend, proving it true after doubt, vindicate, or explaining why it's right, justify?
Each verb highlights a distinct purpose and context in how we stand by our convictions or claims. Hashtag tag tag outro.
Wow. What a journey through the microscopic world of words. We've gone from the subtle shades of lack and need all the way to the powerful distinctions between an opulent display and a sumptuous one. What this deep dive makes incredibly clear is that synonyms are definitely not identical twins. They're more like siblings, aren't they? Each with unique personalities, histories, and contexts. Each one carries a specific weight, a precise flavor that the others simply don't have. By paying attention to these nuances, you don't just become a better communicator, you enrich your understanding of the world itself. It's true. You'll parse arguments with greater clarity, describe experiences with richer detail, and maybe even refine your own thoughts before you speak. The value of this kind of precision, as we've seen today from digging into Websters, is truly immeasurable.
And this journey of discovery within language is genuinely ongoing. It's not about memorizing every single distinction we discussed today, of course. It's more about cultivating an active awareness, a deep curiosity about words. I really encourage you, our listener, to actively notice and question the words you encounter and use daily. Ask yourself, could there be a more precise term here? What subtle meaning is this word conveying that another might not? That's where the real insight happens, in those moments of questioning. If we connect this to the bigger picture, mastering these linguistic distinctions doesn't just make you a better speaker or writer, though it certainly does that. It sharpens your critical thinking skills. It helps you navigate the world, interpret news, understand arguments, engage in discussions with much greater clarity and confidence. You'll be able to discern intent, evaluate information more accurately, and express yourself with unparalleled power and nuance.
So the next time you find yourself reaching for a common word, maybe just pause for a second. Ask yourself, is there a more precise, more powerful synonym waiting in your mental dictionary, maybe one we talked about today, to truly capture what you mean? What new insights might you unlock, not just for others, but for yourself, just by choosing your words more deliberately? Something to think about.